Almost a year since two Virginia State police officers with East Tennessee ties were killed in a helicopter crash during the riots in Charlottesville, Virginia. Next week, they will both be honored at a ceremony for fallen officers. One of the troopers, Berke Bates, graduated from the University of Tennessee and lived in East Tennessee for much of his life. Tonight, reporter Mark Salinger caught up with his brother.
Every day is hard.
It's been 277 days.
He's my baby brother, always will be.
277 days of learning to live without a brother, a son, a hero.
He gave his life to protect people, and that's the most important thing to me.
Days, weeks, months go by. It never gets any easier.
I miss my brother desperately. My parents miss their son.
Berke Bates always dreamed of being a police officer.
He's probably 2 or 3 here, and he's got a police helmet. It's his lifelong dream of flying and helping people by being a law enforcement officer.
That dream came true, but came to an end in August of 2017 when Bates's helicopter crashed in Charlottesville, Virginia. He and a fellow Virginia State trooper were monitoring protests at a white nationalist rally from the sky.
Berke was willing to sacrifice himself to help other people, and that's what he did.
Berke helped catch the suspect who ran his car into a crowd of protesters. Nearly a year later, he has not forgotten.
Anytime you come by the helipad at the Virginia State Police headquarters there in Richmond, it says Trooper Berke Bates helipad.
The Berke Bates helipad in Richmond greets pilots every time they take off and land. Next week, Virginia State Police will honor Bates and Lieutenant Jay Cullen at a memorial for fallen officers.
I don't know, emotional is a strong enough word. It's going to be hard.
A portrait of Berke will be unveiled at the Virginia State Police Academy. He'll be honored with his flight wings on his uniform, a sign he served his state and his country proud.
Most importantly, he was a beloved brother and son, and just someone who really did everything he could to help anybody who could.
Mark Salinger, Fox 43 News.
The ceremony to honor the fallen officers will take place next Tuesday in Richmond, Virginia.